Well, good morning, Bridgepoint. Thanks for being here today. We want to welcome all of our campuses, those watching online. I love the privilege I have to be here with you today. This is part 2 of a conversation that was started last week, in which Tyler Cross and my good friend did a great job of getting this convo going concerning relational conflict, and the big idea from Tyler's angle was this. If we could show it up here on the screen, Tech, you're going to have to carry me on this one today because we lost that darn little clicker thing. Okay, you guys ready to come with me on this journey? It's going to be memorable. All right. So here's Tyler's big idea. The power to forgive comes from the power of being forgiven by Jesus. The power to forgive comes from the power of being forgiven by Jesus. This is demands an internal probing, right? He talked about the difference of the decision making between drinking in the poison of bitterness or choosing to operate out of the power of forgiveness. I was actually at our Seminole campus watching Tyler deliver this message, and every time he said, "Be back next week, don't miss next week," I thought, I need to go read some more books because everyone's coming and I need to be ready to deliver. So hopefully we could get there today. So in talking about conflict, we are talking about relational conflict. There's so many things to talk about in conflict. You could talk about the conflict of war. You could talk about the conflict of tragedy. You could talk about the conflict of having to talk to your internet or TV provider over the phone, right? Scale those as you may. You could talk all kinds of conflict. We are landing the plane, driving in the lane of everyday relational conflict. Everyday relational conflict, pardon me, and we're defining it like this. Conflict is being at odds with another person over what you want, think, or do. Conflict is being at odds with another person over what you want, think, or do. Hopefully that definition works well for us today because I certainly have enough to talk about with that, okay? Now, please hear me. If you are in a situation of severe conflict, one that involves harm or danger, please, following the service, as you leave, before you leave this campus, please go to the prayer and care at your campus. At your campus, and there you're going to meet someone who cares about nothing else other than you and what you're going through. We want to journey with you. We care deeply about you. So if that's you and you're in a situation of conflict, of severity, of harm or danger, please take that opportunity today. As far as the focal point of the message today, we are talking about everyday relational conflict. Everyday relational conflict. And there's really 2 primary ways that we can respond to everyday relational conflict. We could either be avoiders, we could avoid, also known as peace faking, or we could be attackers, right? Also known as peace breaking, avoiding, attacking. Others would say silence or violence, right? But peace faking as an avoider. Why is an avoider a peace faker? Well, because you're like because you're like a turtle retreating into its protective shell, right? Just because you're pretending conflict isn't there, you're faking it, doesn't mean that it's not, right? And an attacker, hello, us, attackers, we're often known as the bull in the china shop. Right? And I'd like to say this is just us on aggressive days. Others would say that this is us every day, okay? So which one are you? Are you an avoider? When it comes to relational conflict, everyday relational conflict, do you avoid? Do you attack? All right? A little bit of both. Do you peace fake, peace break? Today we're talking about peace make. Here we go. All right. So, did you know in the New Testament, every letter in the New Testament has the command to live at peace with the people around you? Every single letter in the New Testament. I didn't know that until studying it. Every letter in the New Testament has the command to live at peace with one another, And here's one of the more popular verses. Romans 12:18. This is from the Apostle Paul. He says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. If it is possible. Now, some of you, your defensive shields are already coming up, activated, because you're like, it's not possible. Okay. Here's the deal. If you exempt yourself so quickly from peace being possible, you are also exempting yourself from experiencing peace. Because we have peace when we know that we've done everything we can for peace, okay? So how can we have peace in everyday relational conflict? How can we have peace in everyday relational conflict? How can we know that we can have peace because we've done everything for peace? Well, we can have that peace. We can know that we've done everything, that we can have peace because we've done everything for peace by actually seeing the way that we see conflict. Changing the way that we see conflict. Put it this way, we can handle conflict well by seeing conflict as an opportunity for good rather than a problem to be solved. We can see conflict as an opportunity, so we change the way we see conflict as an opportunity for good rather than a problem to be solved. Oftentimes, speaking for myself, all right, knowing that it's true to many of you, we see conflict as a problem to be solved, right? We think, hey, first and foremost me, I think, hey, the sooner that you identify the problem I'm identifying and arrive to the conclusions that I have arrived to, I will be fine. Okay? A problem solved. All right? I read a quote recently that skill can win you an argument but lose you a relationship. It's more than a problem to be solved. It's not just merely a problem to be solved. But instead, conflict, first of all, just remember, conflict is not inherently evil. You see, we are all made by God with different designs, different interests, different priorities, right? I think we're all reminded of that on a daily basis. We all see things differently, in different ways, and that's not inherently evil. That's great. That's great, but where conflict goes wrong is because our hearts are evil, and it becomes very distorted. But incredible good can come out of conflict. You can think of situations in your life that you would have no interest in hitting the replay button on, right? No desire to ever go through that again. However, the growth that you experience personally, relationally, emotionally, spiritually, right, is undeniable. So the growth is undeniable. The good, but yet the experience you never care to repeat. But conflict, well handled, can lead to incredible growth, influence. But here's the number one reason why we can choose to see conflict as an opportunity for good, not just merely a problem to be solved. Because Jesus chose to see conflict as an opportunity for good. Yeah, we were in relational conflict with God. He saw us in our sin, and he didn't choose to avoid us and leave us in our mess. By the way, this really was sharp within my own heart when receiving the insight that one of the most loveless things you can do is actually avoid. It's actually a step towards hate. Jesus didn't avoid us and leave us in our mess. He didn't attack us with his anger. Instead, he chose to see conflict, our relational conflict, which we are fully responsible, by the way, as an opportunity to love, reconcile, redeem. He saw it as an opportunity for good. If you feel like you're in relational conflict with God today, I want you to know he sees that as an opportunity for you to experience his love, an opportunity for good. And as imitators of God, we can and should bring that same attitude to conflict. Now, I'm not trying to be ridiculous. I'm not trying to say if you get in a severe car accident, if you're able to get out of the car with all your broken bones, you say, what an opportunity I have. It's not what I'm talking about. Please don't take me out of context. I am talking about everyday relational conflict. How can we handle conflict well? Well, we could change the way that we see conflict in the first place as an opportunity for good. All right, second thing, another way that we can handle conflict well. We can own our pie. Own your pie. All right, what do I mean by that? What am I talking about? Okay, so there is an analogy given to me recently that's really stuck with me, that when it comes to conflict, we are so quick to dismiss our piece, our shared responsibility in the problem. Why? Because we're comparing our piece of the pie to how big the other pieces are for the other person involved. Okay, so like I might take ownership for my piece. Say like, envision the pie here, and I have my little piece, and I'm like, hey, my fault. Sorry about that. Okay, now you're gonna own your pie here, right? Because look, mine's small. Your responsibility is so much greater than mine. But in conflict, we can't just own our piece of the pie. We gotta own the pie. Because even if our problem is only 2% of the problem, we are still responsible for 100% of our 2%. When I heard that shifted a lot of things for me. Even if our wrong is 2% of the problem, we are still 100% responsible for our 2%. Jesus was speaking to this truth. When he said this in a popular passage, he says, how can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye. Let me help you with your piece of the pie. When you can't see past the log in your own eye, that your piece is actually even bigger, right? Hypocrite. Ooh, he's getting warmed up now. First, get rid of the log in your own eye. Your piece is bigger than what you think. Then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. It doesn't mean that there's not a time for gentle restoration, rebuke, and confrontation, right? But don't just own your piece and compare it to the size of others and their share of responsibility. Own your pie. Own the whole thing. All right, so listen, I don't know if I could feel more disqualified from talking to you about what we're talking about today than what I do. I'm a bull in the china shop. I heard a staffer said, and it was words of encouragement, Chad, I'm glad that you're giving this talk on conflict because you're so much bolder than most people. I'm also so much more stupid than other people. Like, the Bible does talk about passion without knowledge, okay? So, yikes. But today I'm not talking like at you. I am figuratively sitting right next to you, okay? I've been diving deep into this topic. I've been reading a lot of books. And there's some success and there's so many more mistakes. And so as I open up with you, first thing I want you to know, my wife genuinely is the best gift that God has ever given me on earth. She's the best. Now, if I say any more, I'll start getting really emotional, okay? I love her. Okay, I'm moving on. That being said, I also want you to know that everything I'm about to tell you has been approved by Nikki Bryan. Oh, you guys are like, oh, Lord have mercy on his poor soul right now. A few weeks ago, it was a Monday night, and in our house recently, we've been referring to Mondays as Monster Monday, just because it's hands down the busiest day of the week in our house. And so, on Monster Monday number 1, we got off to a really rocking start there. My responsibility was to take the kids from finishing up dinner and get them in the car when our kids are 5, 3, and 1. And some of you have way crazier scenarios. This isn't comparison here. I'm just telling you our story. That's pretty stressful in and of itself. Okay, and then to transport them to a local YMCA for childcare and youth basketball, which I'm coaching. And then my wife, as awesome as she is at the same time volunteering in a local juvenile detention center. She's amazing, but it is maniacal, the schedule. And so as I get the kids into the car, and of course it's Monster Monday number 1, and so I'm late, and I also have coaching responsibilities and all that stuff. I turn on the car, my wife's car, and a little gas light pops on. And now you know, right? Like you can tell when like a gas light just came on and when a gas light's like been on. Okay? And because the I think that laughter means this so many different things. But the needle, right, was like right in the center of that E block. I mean, it's been hanging out there for a while. So honestly, I was so angry. I was just so angry. It was the worst in that moment, right? My human emotion there, and the kids were in the car, so I had to manage it somewhat. And so we rolled to the YMCA, like literally kind of, and then we somehow roll back. You know that game where you're barely like, come on, green light, don't make me stop, go again. We roll back and get the kids down, and it was a full night. My wife comes back from being awesome and giving up of her time to invest in young girls who are going through a really hard time. And again, she's just amazing. She comes back. That wasn't the frame of mind I had that night, though. And and I very calmly, and I mean that. There was no punching holes in the wall or something, okay? It was calm and clearly shared with her how angry I was. And my wife, being amazing, very calmly and clearly didn't communicate with me in the next few days. So, I mean, we talked, we were okay, but kind of like in the workplace, when you got some friction with someone, it's not like you walk in and just start hitting each other in the face. All right, it's almost worse. It's small talk. It's passive aggressive, and whew. But I mean, I felt good. I shared my truth. A few days go by. It certainly felt like it, and in the morning early on, I get up and I'm going to the gym, and it's dark, and I'm trying to sneak out of the house and not wake up the family, and there's an envelope on the door in red marker, and it says, Chad, please read sometime this morning. Okay, people, it's not Valentine's Day. This is not good. I mean, I'm not shocked by it, but so I take it, and as I drive into the gym, the envelope sitting in the right passenger seat just looking at me, taunting me, and so I get to the gym. Before I walk in, I open up that envelope right there, and it's confirmed. It's not 5 things I love about you. That's not what that letter's about. But seriously, I really did believe. I was telling myself this as the drive down as that envelope was waiting to be opened. I knew that this was an opportunity for growth for me and Nikki. I knew that. We're good. We love each other. We are committed. We're going to be okay. We're going to grow from this. But I knew I was going to have to bite the bullet because it was going to hurt for the next few minutes. And so in that letter, as I read through, one of the things that really stood out was Nikki took full ownership for her responsibility. She said, hey, babe, I put you in a bad situation, actually almost a dangerous one, by leaving the tank totally empty, and you got 3 kids. It's at night. I'm so sorry. That was 100% my fault. I take full responsibility, and I mean that. I am so sorry. And Chad, what hurt me was that you so calmly and clearly, parentheses, which I give you credit for, shared with me how angry you were with me, but you never mentioned your shared responsibility. She goes on to say, Chad, I forgot to fill the gas tank. I often do. But Chad, you forgot your wallet, and you often do. She was right. I held her fully accountable for something that I was also responsible for. Could have changed that circumstance. And so, in recognizing that I had that plank in front of me, right? But I was just so quick to dismiss it, right? Because here's the worst part. I knew in that moment of anger in the driveway when I turned on that car and saw the gas light, I knew I was missing my wallet. That thought did occur. I just didn't care that much because I wanted to talk about her issue. I saw my piece of the pie, but I wanted to talk about how big her piece was, like the rest of it. I was so quick to dismiss my responsibility, to look over my plank and focus on her speck. But recognizing my mistake was one thing, confessing it was another. And just as Nikki took time to try something different and to wisely communicate with me in a way that might be more fruitful than just, meeting at the kitchen late at night and going after that conversation until we can't anymore. Instead, she tried something different, and I wanted to try something different. The scripture says this about confessing our sins. Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. And I had to learn the difference between a hurried and hollow apology and a authentic and thoughtful confession. I'm just being honest with you. I think both my wife and I are terrible at apologizing, often. I think most people are. But there's a big difference between being hurried and hollow in an apology and offering a genuine and thoughtful confession. So I actually grabbed a book called The Peacemaker, and I went to a chapter about confession, and in the back there's an outline of how to write a confession. And I took the time to do that, and I shared that with my wife, and it was a game changer. It was a game changer. And listen, a few weeks ago, I had an outline for this message of how we can resolve everyday relational conflict. I had an outline, but you know what point was missing? Owning your pie, confession. Then I feel like God took a brick and hit me square in the forehead with it. And I realized that I don't know what kind of conflict resolution anyone can have without genuine and thoughtful confession. Because you will be surprised. Everyone has their own exceptions, their own situations, but you'll be surprised how quickly a conflict will thaw out when a genuine and thoughtful confession is made. So, how can we handle conflict well? One, by changing how we see it. See it as a conflict as an opportunity for good, not just a problem to be solved. Two, we can handle conflict well by owning our pie. Own your pie. Third, we can handle conflict well by asking, what do I really want? What do I really want? Tyler's message last week was so focused on that heart part, right? The internal probing, asking the question, what am I drinking in? Am I drinking in that poison of bitterness or operating out of the power of forgiveness? I am so thankful that in those days that we're passing, as Nikki and I had to live out that tension a little bit, right? Respectfully, right? With boundaries, okay? But I'm so thankful that she chose to operate out of power of forgiveness and that she wasn't drinking that bitterness. I didn't know, honestly, for a little bit, but I was so thankful for that. And that's what it demands is how are we going to respond to conflict? Our heart comes first. Conflict starts in the heart. I heard someone recently share that if we just dealt with our heart first, the majority of our relational conflict would go away. If we just dealt with our heart first, because, put it this way, all right, Bible verse first. What is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? That heart part, right, starting with your heart first? Because the reality is this, the heart part is the hard part. The heart part is the hard part. If you know, you know, right? That internal probing of what do I really want here? And just having an everyday kind of conflict, because we all do, because we're around people and people present problems. Plenty of blessings and, right, wonderful things too, but absolutely, relational conflict is an everyday kind of thing. And I was reading and I was asked this question, the book asked this question, what are you really living for? And in that conflict, in that argument that I was in with someone, I asked myself, okay, what am I really living for? I know as a pastor the right answers and stuff, but what's really the answer? Chad, what do you think about most? What really is most important to you right now, today? And it changed the way I viewed and approached that argument. Why? Because how many of you know that sometimes, maybe often, what you're upset about isn't what you actually think you're upset about? Because when you probe your heart, you find that root desire. And a lot of times you have to weed out the sinful desires. And our desires are sinful. So a boss called you out at work and you didn't like it, but then when you probed your heart, you went down the layers and you realized it actually really your anger came from insecurity. Your insecurity was based upon something else, and you had to probe your heart. The heart part is the hard part. And when we get to that desire, maybe it's just pride, maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's greed, right? And we're like, well, we have to ask the question, is this worth fighting over? No, it's sinful. It's wrong. And in that case, we overlook an offense. The Bible talks clearly all throughout, especially in Proverbs, the credit someone has in overlooking an offense. It says that sensible people control their temper. They earn respect by overlooking wrongs. So listen, whenever healthy and appropriate, we are, as followers of Jesus, or if you're just here today looking for some wisdom, it is to your benefit, and probably the benefit of the people around you, to overlook a wrong whenever it's healthy and appropriate. Whenever it's healthy and appropriate, okay? To overlook a wrong. And often that comes from probing our heart, pulling out that gunk, right? And seeing really, really what's driving our emotion. So whenever we can overlook a wrong, we do. However, there are times to not overlook an offense, okay? Please hear me on this. Do not overlook the offense when it is damaging your relationship with a person. You want to say we're good, but it still affects how you think about them, how you talk about them, how you talk to them, right? It's damaging your relationship. You can't just overlook that. You need to confront that in a gracious and loving way. Don't overlook the offense when it's hurting other people. Maybe you've brought more people into your conflict. There's been kind of victims, right? You can't overlook that. You have to address that. Maybe it's hurting the offender. Maybe the offender knows it's hurting him or her. Maybe the offender doesn't know. Maybe it's a blind spot that's hurting the offender and they actually don't know it. Don't overlook that. You got to be loving and address that. Or maybe it's significantly dishonoring God. All right, maybe it's with another person who's committed to following Jesus, but yet you see them speak, I don't know, things of hate or animosity, and you're like, well, hang on, that doesn't jive with what I know about God and you, right? And you bring it with grace and love. It's the right thing to do. Don't overlook the offense. So, in handling conflict well, we can change how we see conflict. See it as an opportunity for good. We can own our faults, own your pie, and ask, what do I really want? So, assuming we look at conflict as an opportunity for growth, we've owned our faults, right? And we probed our hearts. Now what do we do? Well, we handle conflict well by communicating personally with love. Now, I wanted to just say communicate with love, simple enough, like clear enough, if you will. Not simple enough, clear enough. But I wanted to put personally in there because I know many of us would be in here trying to figure out all the ways we could communicate lovingly without it being personal, you know? It'd be more passive, indirect, okay? But that's not what the Bible calls us to. Jesus says this, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. So basically, if they listen to you, bonus points. But don't excuse yourself from taking the right action. This does not involve, just between the two of you, that eliminates social media. Okay? That eliminates a bunch of things. It really just focuses your attention on one thing of how can I communicate this personally between the two of us in love. Now, if you ever feel unsafe being alone with a person and having that conversation, well, the Bible talks about bringing in a trusted third party, right? But it's to communicate personally with love. Now, how do we do this? How do we communicate personally in love, with love? There's a book that's been huge for me called Crucial Conversations. And one of the conclusions was this, that the most influential people in the workplace are people who are the best at handling crucial conversations. A crucial conversation being something where there's a conversation where there's varied opinion, emotions are high, and there's stakes to be had, right? Crucial conversation. The most influential people in the workplace, the studies show, the research shows, are the people who can master crucial conversations well. Hey, if that's true on the corporate level, think about what that means for being a kingdom influencer. It's vital that we can do this well. So, how do we communicate personally with love? One, mutual purpose. Your conversation starts with finding mutual purpose, meaning this. Here's a question you can ask. Does the person that I'm talking to, do they believe that I value their interests, goals, and priorities? Do they believe that I value that? This was huge for me, formative for me in learning as a guy in the workplace to think, to put myself in the seat of my supervisor. Right? Not just think about what I want and how he can help me, but it really changed our conversations the day where that switch was flipped on for me, where I thought, man, what's it look like to sit in his seat? What's it look like to have to supervise me, a bald little pit bull, coming in your office all the time saying, this is what I need from you. This is why you're slowing me down, man, right? I mean, what's that like? And then he's got several people behind me doing the same thing, right? How can I connect with where he is? By the way, this has to be sincere. Whew, that's the deal breaker, right? It's got to be genuine. Find mutual purpose. That starts the conversation, mutual purpose. How do you keep the conversation going? By having mutual respect. Mutual respect. Someone said, respect is like air. As long as it's there, nobody cares. But once it's gone, it's the only thing anyone can think about, okay? You want to kill a conversation, lose respect. The question you're asking here is, does this person feel like I respect them? Do they really feel like I respect them? Finally, determine what you ultimately want to say. When it comes to these conversations, there's so many things to say, right? You're like, I have a million things. Like when they said this to me years ago, when they looked at me like this the other day, and then I heard they also said, okay, determine what you ultimately want to say. Remember, you did that heart probing, right? So make sure what you ultimately want to say matches up with that ultimate desire. But it takes time to think about this. Someone asked me recently, Chad, do you know how to make a chicken dinner? The question was as random as it sounds right now. No, I don't. Not from that part of the country, I guess. She said, Chad, when you chase a chicken, you don't chase all the chickens. You chase one chicken, and you run that chicken down until it becomes so tired that you get that chicken and you make chicken dinner. Thought good. The only thing I knew about that was a scene from Rocky, right? Like that's all I had. Point being, focus. Chase it down. Determine what you ultimately want to say, and that takes time and probing. Don't chase rabbits or squirrels. Chase chickens. Okay. And if you forget all that, here's a verse I want you to hold on to, because sometimes you might forget. What were those 3 points? Well, hold on to this truth, and you'll go pretty far. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. If you're quick to slow to speak, quick to slow. If you're quick to listen, quick to slow, I guess is good. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, you have opened up a doorway for God's desires to become your desires. All right? Another way of putting this is this. An old American writer, speak when you are angry and you will make the best speech you will ever regret. So, how do we handle conflict well? See conflict as an opportunity for good, own your pie, and ask, what do I really want? Finally, in that conversation, communicate personally with love. And it all comes to this today. When we choose to see conflict as an opportunity for good, we can experience peace, and others can experience love. We can experience peace because we've done everything we can for peace. We could be at peace with that, and others can experience love. Listen, our conflict resolutions can look all different, right? We're different people in different situations. Maybe conflict resolution for you today looks like a roommate conversation. Maybe it looks like choosing that conflict that you're in with your spouse, significant other, or friend as a growth opportunity and not just a problem to be solved. Maybe for you, it looks like tough decisions in the workplace this week, but rather than be guided by knee-jerk reactions, anger, resentment, you are prompted by love. It could look all sorts of different ways, but when it's interwoven with this truth, to see conflict as an opportunity for good, we experience peace and others can experience love. Last week, Tyler said that we have the power to forgive comes from the power of being forgiven by Jesus. The power to forgive comes from the power of being forgiven by Jesus. Well, the power to love also comes from the power of being loved by Jesus. We love because he first loved us. And Jesus says that people will know that we are his followers by our love for one another. But look, the devil has been using conflict to destroy churches and to attack, stagnate followers of Jesus individually and collectively. But we can use what the devil uses to harm us. Instead, God wants to use to build us. God has called and empowered us, his followers, to light up the world. And we can do that by doing something that most people don't do well, by choosing to handle conflict well. Remember, when we choose to see conflict as an opportunity for good, we can experience peace and others can experience love. No matter our conflict situation, we always have the choice to honor God and to love people. That is always good. Let's pray. Lord, thank you that you meet us in our mess. Thank you, God, as Tyler talked about so well last week. Lord, that you're with us in the probing of our heart. And you're with us when that conflict becomes even more outwardly as we deal with people. Lord, for those of us today who are in severe situations of conflict, harm or danger, I pray that they would show up in prayer and care, and that we would be able to journey with them. Lord, I pray in all of our situations and conflict, God, that you would bring to light the conflict in our life that we need to see or handle differently. Because God, what the devil uses to beat us down and break us apart, you can use to build. So Jesus, would you do that? We can only do that with your power. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.